Is President Trump stalling solar and wind projects? Next on the Energy News Beat Daily Stand-Up.
Is Trump stalling solar and wind projects? Or are people waking up to the fact that China has embedded kill switches and spy products in the renewable energy components? You can't buy this kind of entertainment. I had fun on this one. Michael, this story was actually published from Felicity Broadstack on oilprice.com. She wrote, "Who's stalling wind and solar?" And I went, okay, let's take a look at what she has to say. She says United States President Donald Trump announced plan to tighten federal permitting on restricting solar and wind. And she goes on, but what she does not mention is what Secretary Burgum just pointed out this week. I mean, this week, he points out, holy smokes, we're prioritizing secure supply chains and reliable baseload to unleash American energy. And in this video clip, in this Substack article I put in, Doug goes, oh, and they've been bugging all of the wind and solar equipment to have kill switches. And I had published that in May. And so this is absolutely a hoot. And so when you sit back and take a look, is Felicity at Oil Price right in saying Trump's delaying it? No, he's going, hold up. Let's get some real supply issues fixed. Let's put in reliable energy and not have any backdoors for hackers. And when you take a look at the patterns of espionage, let's not forget the spy balloons. Let's also not forget in 2024, I wrote, could China hack our electric grid? In 4 words, yes, and how soon? And the real question was Mayorkas in on it? That went nuts on the story as well. So this is not something we've been sitting on our hands kind of going, oh, wait a minute, this may or may not happen. But it brings up a huge question. The erosion of confidence highlights a broader geopolitical reality. Renewable energy isn't just about sustainability, it's about sovereignty. For China, the hidden radios and backdoors may have secured short-term gains, but they've ultimately cost the long game in wind and solar dominance because we're going to find new supply chains.
I mean, I think you've laid out the circumstance very, very precisely and extremely well. You know, it's the unfortunate side of regulation. And this is where I don't go full libertarian or for anarchist like I think you do, Stu. I mean, there is a need for regulation.
Yeah.
Good regulation that is sounded in good policy and has the ability to be updated as new information comes in is the best type of regulation. And I love your last quote here. The lesson is clear. In an era of cyber threats, trust is the ultimate currency. And that's the key. We've got to trust that our energy supply chains are correct. Because, I mean, like you said, one bad actor getting into one part of our energy grid, and all of a sudden, a third of the United States is without power. I mean, it could be absolutely incredible. It could be scary. I mean, I don't think we can fully understand what it would be like a world if all of a sudden for 3 days we didn't have power. Woo!
Boom. Oops.
I'd be sweating. That's all I know.
There you go. Hey, let's go to Lee Zeldin. Zeldin and Trump prepare an assault on EPA endangerment finding. This is from our buddy over there, David Blackman. And I'll tell you what, we've been expecting this on a long time, but they're trying to make sure they can get this through the courts. The Trump administration is gearing up to revoke one of the most overreaching, unscientific regulatory edifices ever erected, the EPA's 2009 endangerment finding. News broke this week that the Environment Protection Agency has drafted a plan to rescind this cornerstone of federal climate policy. And I just heard Al Gore say he saw a man-bear pig. I mean, this is absolutely horrific for that man. His days of being a graft and thief are over after this.
No, absolutely. He's just going to have to go back to pretending that he invented the internet, which the funny part is you could argue that he was responsible for the funding and pushing the funding through the Senate that ultimately led to the internet. So I do find it hilarious that on some level, that's where his ignorance comes from, is the fact that, oh, I signed a bill. Okay, well, go back to grifting when it comes to climate. You're doing a much, much better job there. I love the fact that Lee Zeldin, who's leading the EPA under the Trump administration, administration is doing this type of stuff. I love the fact that they're focusing on legal arguments, specifically saying that the EPA lacks power to make broad proclamations about greenhouse gases without specific congressional authorization. I mean, once upon a time, you actually had to go to Congress to get things done. And now all of a sudden it feels like we can just, executive order here, sweeping policy over here. It's like, oh, it's almost like the Constitution has something in it called Congress, where we actually feel like it's a representative government. Unbelievable.
Well, you've opened up a can of worms there. And part of the problem is because Congress has not been doing their job. They gave all their power to the unelected bureaucrats that have more power than the politicians. So hopefully we'll see some of this turn around. Let's roll to the next story here. Department of Interior secures a win for the American energy dominance safely and timely. I like this. This is partially a story of a resounding victory for American energy independence. The Department of Interior, the Department of Interior has successfully facilitated the restart of oil production at the Santa Ynez Unit, SYU, off the coast of California. But this is going to be all for naught, Michael. In 2026, they lose 20% of their refining capacity. So this is yay. Okay, now what are you going to do for me when Gavin Newsom's plans go through? They did just announce that California is trying to find a buyer for that one, which has never been done before. So I think Gavin Newsom knows they've pooped on the rug.
Well, I think Gavin Newsom understands he's pooped on the rug a bunch, but he's still trying to get his media tour out so that he can kick off his 2028 campaign. I mean, California is probably the epitome of terrible energy policy. We see it time and time again. I think, the interesting part that this points out is the lack of pipelines that are going across the Sierra Mountains, which on one hand is a massive capital infrastructure project. On one hand is also there's some environmental things to worry about. I'm not, yes, we should be navigating our mountains. I don't think we should just be haphazardly laying pipelines in them though. So I think there's a fine line to bat there, but that truly isolates that market from the other parts of the United States, which forces them to import all their energy from people that don't have U.S. best interests at heart. I mean, it's really the thread between this line and the first article that you wrote. There's a line there.
Yep. You forgot Alaska. They were importing almost all of their oil from Alaska.
Yeah, they used to, at least.
Yes, until Gavin got in. Let's go to the next story here. Trump's tariffs in flux as Trump and von der Leyen set to meet with trade deal balance. At the time we record this, they will have met and everything else, but updates on the U.S. pressure China deal, stabilizing force of pressures. But now I started looking around on this, and we take a look at what he's trying to do with China, and he may be letting Russia and Iran and Iraq sanctions go in order to get Putin to the table. Wow. I did not see that mix.
No, I mean, I think Trump has found himself in an interesting scenario when it comes to Russia, because he said that the moment he took office, he was going to end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. And this is where, I was talking with, I was at a client's office on Saturday doing a little extra work, and we were talking about a potential new project that we were going to do. And I thought it was important to say, hey, let's go back and look at what worked on the first project, what didn't work, and then use that as a template to how we move forward. And I think what Trump does is, and one of the lessons, I guess, from that was, hey, we need to be a lot more clear about the specific drilling plan that we're going to do, because it's not that we are behind schedule, or it's not that we are not fulfilling the production targets of this project. The problem is the drilling schedule has been a lot slower than we expected. And so the problem is you can paint yourselves in these corners by theoretically saying, yes, I'm going to do this, but you put these insane timelines on that cause you to not necessarily be able to fulfill it in the time frame that you said. And that's my issue here specifically with Trump. I think he came in and said, I'm going to be able to end the Ukraine war. Well, I believe that. But then he went a step further and said, I'm going to be able to do it in 24 hours. And whether that's hyperbole whether that was Trump just being Trump. And I'm okay, and trust me, I like Trump being Trump. I find it refreshing for our commander in chief to speak so openly. But you can paint yourself into these corners where now all of a sudden he may have to overreact from a energy policy standpoint in order to get Russia to the table by going after China via these tariffs, that these second and third order effects that we always talk about can really all be come back to just say you're going to end the Russia-Ukraine war. You don't need to put a timeline on it.
No. The problem with President Trump is that his entire team was not prepared and were feeding him misinformation. So what they were giving him information saying that he was negotiating from a position of strength with Russia, he was not. So, all right.
Well, that brings up a whole nother can of worms, but I'll leave it at there because we've got a show to do. So anything else?
Nope. We're off and running.
Cool. Well, let's jump in, guys, and talk a little oil and gas finance. But before we do that, let's go ahead and pay the bills. As always, thank you for checking us out here on the world's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com. We've had the last 4 or 5 days. Views have been going off. Everyone's checking us out.
Gotta like it.
Gotta like it. So we love that, guys. Thank you. Thank you to everybody. Hit out and check out the links in the description below. You can see all of the articles, all of the timestamps. You can also find the link to our Substack, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. We appreciate every single one of our subscribers. It's really the best place to get a daily dump of everything that's going on in the energy business in one fell swoop. Stu does a great job of taking basically the most important topic of the day, digesting it and giving it to you in a daily newsletter. That's theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. Highly recommend subscribing there. If you would want to support the show further, sign up for a paid subscription. It really is the best way to support the show. Obviously, subscribing for a free subscription is great, but if you really want to go that extra next step, subscribing to a paid subscription is the way to do it. We are gearing up for our next Energy State of the Union that will be going out exclusively to our paid subscribers, so you don't want to miss that. Also, guys, thank you to Reese Energy Consulting for making the show possible. We absolutely love everything about Reese Energy Consulting. Guys, they are probably the #1 midstream experts and consulting firm on the planet. If you guys have any problems, whether you're an upstream company, need help with purchasing or marketing, guys, they can solve it for you and get back dollars into your pocket that you're wasting just because you don't know how to go approach these midstream companies and negotiate your first purchaser contracts. If you're in the midstream space and you have a project that you need some support on, or you're considering a new investment and need some red team analysis, the team at Reese Energy Consulting is as experienced working with all companies throughout the value chain, whether you are two guys in a garage or whether you're the largest publicly traded company in the world. Their clients span that entire reach, and you are a fit for them. That's reeseenergyconsulting.com. And finally, guys, check out investinoil.energynewsbeat.com or hit the link in the description below if you are interested in adding oil and gas to your portfolio. We have a great survey there that will talk and kind of run through exactly some of the high-level questions that you're going to need to know. And depending on what your answers are, we're going to send you a bunch of information on what it looks like to invest throughout the entire energy chain. And again, depending on your answers, we will possibly point you in the right direction. So that's investinoil.energynewsbeat.com for our oil and gas portfolio survey. Stu, let's go ahead and run through some top line numbers here. S&P 500 was up about 0.4 of a percentage point. NASDAQ down up about 0.3 of a percentage point. 2 and 10-year yields basically flat for the day. On Friday, dollar index up about 0.1 of a percentage point. Bitcoin up above $119,000. So about rolling over as we record this about Sunday afternoon. It's up about 1%. Crude oil dropped about 1.3 percentage points down to 65.16. Actually, the lowest it's closed on a Friday in 3 weeks. Brent oil was down about 0.3 of a percentage point down to 68.48. Natural gas fairly flat for the day, was up about 0.5 percentage point on a relative basis, up to $3.11. XOP, which is our E&P securities contract, actually dropped about 0.6 of a percentage point. But as I mentioned, oil finished on Friday at basically a 3-week low, mainly on the concerns of what Stu talked about when it came to the Trump tariffs. Remember, these tariffs on China are related to the fact that China is buying Russian oil, and it's really we're going to get at Russia through China and hopefully have China put pressure on Russia. Between me, you, and the fence post, because we're all friends here, I don't think that's going to work. I think we're going to have to get a little more creative when it comes to that. Stu and I have talked too much. Sanctions don't work. I think some other interesting things to note on Friday, we did see that European Commissioner, President Ursula. I can't. The fact that her literal name is President Ursula, it's like a bad Disney movie gone wrong. They did meet on Sunday in Scotland, and they said they expected to reach a framework on a trade deal this weekend, or the weekend that has just happened. So it could be very interesting on that point. We did see U.S. manufactured capital goods unexpectedly fall in June, while those shipments of those products actually increased moderately, which is truly suggests that business spending on that type of equipment has slowed considerably in the second quarter, most likely due to the tariffs. Again, the tariffs paid by the importer, not necessarily the exporter. We also did see that the U.S. is preparing to maybe allow different partners, Venezuela's state-run oil company PDVSA, to operate with limited sanctions in the nation, their biggest partner being U.S.-based Chevron. That theoretically could boost Venezuelan oil exports by a little more than 200,000 per day, which would actually be a huge, huge boost to U.S. refiners. As remember that really heavy Venezuelan crude is perfect for a lot of the Gulf Coast refineries. And so this would, quote unquote, ease some tightness. That was in a note by ING analysts. There is an interesting thing. We also did see that OPEC came out on Friday and said that their joint minister committee will schedule to convene on Monday as you listen to this, but it does not hold any decision-making authority over production levels. Those four OPEC delegates said an OPEC Plus panel is to raise oil output when it meets, noting that the producer is keen to recover market share while summer demand is helping to absorb the extra barrels. I'm going to call, again, a little bit of buhaki on that. I don't necessarily think it goes back to market share. I think they're telling us it's market share. I think it has everything to go back to an increase of revenue. Again, in order to increase revenue, you have to increase barrels on the market. But if you want to diversify your economy away from oil, you need money to do that. So it's this real catch-22 they find. I think that's the longer term. I think it's convenient to say market share because then it allows Trump to be cool with that because it drives oil prices down. So I think there's another thing. We did see the world's number 2 crude oil producer, the great state of Russia, in Stu's words, Stu being the chief of staff there over to Putin. We did see daily oil exports from its western ports were set to be around 1.77 million barrels per day in August, which is actually down from 1.93 million barrels, according to the numbers in July. And that's based on some Reuters calculations. We also, Stu, did see rig counts drop on Friday by 2. So U.S. rig counts down 2 week over week to 542. Canada actually saw an increase of 10 rigs. And internationally, we saw an increase of 27 rigs. On the back of that, we saw the U.S. frac count spread drop again by 6, meaning, we rigs are dropping, frac counts dropping. It's only a matter of time before we begin to see production roll over. I think there's been a lot of interesting conversations out there. I think, in terms of peak Permian oil, I think there's some very interesting. I was, in the midst of reading an article today or yesterday talking about some specifics when it comes to shale oil and how that business model of shale, it was always designed to be a short-term business model. And yes, it's extended 20, 25 years now, but the end could be coming near. Super interesting conversation. We're going to have to talk a little bit more about that. But finally, Stu, we did see Ovintiv drop Q2 earnings, and really the at a high level, the street reacted very positively to their earnings report. As I mentioned, the XOP, which is our kind of EMP aggregate ETF, was down 0.6 percentage points. Ovintiv was up 3.6 percentage points. Why? Well, it actually has more to do with what's going on in Canada than the United States. Going back to rig counts, Canada has increased 10 rigs week over week and are actually pushing their July 2024 number here shortly. And remember, Ovintiv is the combination, or is includes Encana, which had an extremely strong Canadian presence. To give you guys a quick idea, their Permian production averaged about 250,000 BOE per day, which is 80% liquids, which is great. Get this, Stu. Montney production, which is their Canada asset, averaged 300,000 BOE per day, only 20% liquids though, but pretty unbelievable. They're actually going to invest somewhere 575 to 625 million in 2025, which would constitute between 75 to 85 net wells. They're expected to spend anywhere between 1.2 and 1.25 billion into the Permian, which is about 130 to 140 net wells, and they'll drill a little bit in the Mid-Continent region where they have about 100,000 BOE per day, about 59% liquids. So real interesting here. I think at a top line, Stu, the numbers that came out, net earnings of about $107 million, which worked out to be about 1.8 or $1.18 per share. Cash flow from operating activities, about $1 billion. Non-GAAP cash flow, which again, who knows what that means, but it was about 913 million. And they spent about 512 million in capital expenditures and about 392 million of free cash flow, which is actually pretty good. Their total 615,000 BOE per day ended up being at the top end of their guidance, which I think considering the fact that they spent $100 million less in CapEx since quarter over quarter and increased their production to the top end of the guidance, I think what the street rewarded them from the stock price bump really was on well performance. And so they're doing I think a great job down there. I'm cracking up, Stu, because in the middle we've got the little contextualities in there, and I just see a nice big picture of our favorite person, Mike Umbro, standing there with the telescope. So shout out to good friend of the show, Mike Umbro. But that's really all I saw, Stu. What else do you have? My favorite time of the week? What are you nervous about this week? What's keeping you up at night?
What in the world is President Trump going to do this week?
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
No kidding. What files are going to get released this week? Who knows?
Who knows? We're going to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely, guys. Well, we appreciate you guys checking us out here on the world's greatest daily energy news show. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.